Welcome to this digital learning platform of Department of College Education, Karnataka LMS. In this video, let's discuss as you like it analysis of Act 4 and 5. So before going to the today's discussion, let me have the recapitulation of the capsule summary we had seen in the earlier videos. In Act 4, we came to know that having compelled by Duke Ferdinand, Oliver reaches the forest of Arden in search of Orlando, but he in turn we find being rescued by Orlando himself. Later he finds Ganymede and he tells her how Orlando saved him from the death by rescuing him from a poisonous snake bite and a lion's attack. There, Rosalind becomes completely overcome by her love towards Orlando. She therefore decides in the same act to end everything, the pretension. And Oliver quickly also falls in love with Celia, and Touchstone also chases off William a lout and uh, concludes with the love with Adri a goatherd. Thus, the stage is set for the finalization, rather completion of three pairs of lovers' love story. When we go to the Act 5, in its capsule summary, we came to know the flight of the best men from the court of Ferdinand caused him worry, and he perceived the danger with the new alliance is forming at the forest of Arden. Therefore, he steps out of his court in search of Duke Senior, Orlando, and others in the forest to the forest of Arden. But as he enters the forest, he meets some hermit. There he gets transformed by that hermit. This transformation in him is an essential transformation in many of the characters of Shakespeare, as we know, and thus it's a transformation from complexity or conflict of the play into the resolution or denouement. And we also find Rosalind, who is disguised as Ganymede, promises all to solve the problems of everyone, and she changes her male attire and appears suddenly as herself, that means as Rosalind herself, and then the play ends with the happy wedding ceremonies of all the four pairs, three in particular. The rightful Duke ultimately at the end regains his power as Duke Ferdinand renounces his position, or he refuses to accept the throne. He changes himself. Thus, Act 5 concludes the play in a very resoluting all the conflicts and making the comedy as you like it, as a perfect comedy. Let's go to the scene-wise discussion of Act 4 first, then we will take up the discussion of Act 5. When come to the scene 1, analysis of scene 1, so the opening of the scene takes place with Rosalind mocking at Jacques for his melancholy as well as his affected mannerism of lisping. Because Jacques approaches Rosalind. Rosalind is actually Ganymede. She's waiting for somebody's company. So he is found to Rosalind. She calls him a melancholy fellow, and he accepts that. He wants to be a melancholy fellow, and he identifies himself so, and that is not like that of others' melancholy, but it is inspired by many travels and experiences. That means the melancholy in Jacques, according to him, is the result of his worldly experience, out of his travelings and all that. But for Rosalind, she prefers to have a fool. She prefers to have a fool to him, because for her, than the worldly experiences or sad experiences of him, it is better to have the fun of a fool. That's the different view towards world. And with her words, Jacques departs the place. There enters Orlando. Thus, and it is also important to note that by taking the example of Jacques, he also satirizes the men of that age who had affected mannerism, likeness for something very unusual, very cynical, very melancholic in their approach, and also who have got lisp in their talk and all that. Such kind of affected mannerisms of those people who have traveled a lot across the globe, and Shakespeare makes a criticism of them by using the satire of Jacques. Then we find, of course, Jacques sticks to his view and he prefers to be sad and silent and leaves the place. Then Rosalind, as Ganymede, is delighted by love of Orlando. She is in the attire of Ganymede. She cannot reveal her real identity, but she is filled with that love towards Orlando. In the meantime, Orlando enters here. Rosalind, as dressed as Ganymede, meets him. She scolds him for missing their meeting or arriving in time. The scene creates gentle humor, sweetness of love, because on the one hand she blames him, but that was not completely out of her mindset. The humor here is, for example, she says she would rather have a snail for a lover. That means she considers a snail is better than a lover because that moves faster than a lover, in her opinion. She orders Orlando to woo her, and he says that she were really a Rosalind, he would kiss her before saying anything. Here again, you find that sweetness of love. He wants to kiss her, but she, for a moment, mm, tells him to keep that or save that kiss for some other time, for another moment. That she knows that when he feels he's run out of things to say, there he can use that kiss. That is how she points out. Again, we see Rosalind teases Orlando that she will not accept him as a lover, and he dramatically replies that he will die. But here Shakespeare makes a universal statement that no one in the history, no one in anywhere died out of love. That means he says, citing that no one has ever died from love, is a universal statement that Shakespeare makes, that love only unites people, not making them die. That kind of thing. And she finally announces she also love Orlando, and she takes the help of Celia to play the role of his priest to make a mock marriage between the two of them. Next, we notice Rosalind, as Ganymede, tries to make herself seem unappealing by promising Orlando that she will be jealous and temperamental in their marriage, and all the more she's she's all the more so because of and despite of her wisdom. In the sense, you observe here that she shows her future vision also. She has in her mind, she has that future vision, that she thinks of her future in on the side. uh, when she is having all this discussion, he departs from the place, because he had a call from the duke, and Rosalind protests it, but he cannot. That he promises that he would come back. In the meantime, Celia comes there, criticizes Rosalind for her portraying women badly, because she, in the attire of Ganymede as a man, she portrayed women in a bad way. So Rosalind responds to Celia that she was in extreme love. How much she was in love. She's in love that she says, almost she says it is only Cupid, the god of love, could assess the depth of her love. That's how we see the love-stricken condition of Rosalind is also explained in this. But interesting thing is that there is a line here in the poem that men are April when they woo, December when they wed. This line is catchy because that is the one where even Shakespeare attacks the attitude of men. When they woo, they are April because it is like spring, with all the imaginations, with all the colorful words. But it becomes December, a harsh winter when they wed. The change in the attitude of men and women is highlighted in the analysis or in the scene 2. Scene 1. Yeah, let's move on to scene 2. In a very short scene 2, we find that Jacques addresses the Duke Senior's lords, the followers, who kill a deer. He addresses the first lord actually and tells him that the person who killed the first lord is the one who killed the deer, and suggests him that he should present that killed deer like a Roman conqueror to the king, to the duke. And he says, give the deer's horns like a victory branch to the duke. In the meantime, the second lord accompanies the presentation with a song. Thus, we see the incident where Jacques mocks at those duke's followers, Duke Senior's followers who killed the deer. It's a kind of mockery at the Elizabethan tradition of killing animals and presenting certain things, maybe a horn to the king or queen there. Thus, we find a mockery at the killing practice of killing animals, hunting animals is presented there, because they all carry that died animal, singing a song. That song is actually a cuckoldry, and they say, "Take thou no scorn to wear the horn." Right? They praising, or rather, they're addressing the king, the duke, and then they carried it. Thus, Shakespeare presents a kind of mockery here in scene 2. The important scene here is scene number 3 in Act 4, that further continues that Rosalind's uh, condition of completely in love with Orlando. Here, Rosalind, disguised as Ganymede, is again impatiently waiting for Orlando's arrival, who had gone to meet Duke Senior. At that moment, because of her waiting, she realizes Celia suggests her that he has gone to sleep, he won't come back. Thus, we find Rosalind actually is in tension. She is worried about his arrival. In her condition of extreme love, she is anxious to meet him. At that moment, a letter comes from Sylvius. He approaches her and gives a letter. In the letter, there is a in which he also reports while handing over the letter that Phoebe wrote with an angry look on her face, stern bro ಅನ್ನುವ phrase ಬರ್ತದೆ. Right, you see, she wrote that letter to him, Sylvius, and Rosalind read it, and she tells Celia that it is a list of insults and wonders why Phoebe would write such a letter. She first accuses of Sylvius being its author, assuming no woman could write so rudely and injuriously. But Rosalind then reads the letter. Initially, they felt so, but at the outset, she said that. But she continues her reading. Initially, she feels she pretends as if she's reading. Later, she feels compassion and read the full letter. When she reads the full letter, she finds that the letter is actually addressed to her and expressing Phoebe's love towards her. Uh, there, it was not an insult actually. It was not an expression of insult or chiding, but it proclaimed, while you chide me, I did love. How then might your prayers move? That is what the thing. Therefore, we observe the love of Phoebe is expressed. In fact, this makes uh, Rosalind to feel apathy towards Phoebe, indifference towards her, and she tells Sylvius that Phoebe should love Sylvius, otherwise she won't. Rosalind, that is Ganymede, won't love her. That is the way she tries to persuade the mindset of Phoebe and send Sylvius back. He departs. In the meantime, we see another important stage is Oliver entering the scene. He, after reaching the forest, having commissioned or compelled by Duke Senior, Duke Ferdinand, he came in search of Orlando. He when he enters the place, he had uh, a fair note to express. That is, uh, he enters the cottage of Ganymede and Eliana. There, he tells them that he had a note. He hands over a handkerchief. Right, in this point, we see it was actually given by Orlando. A napkin, a bloody handkerchief, was handed over to Rosalind, and those were actually sent by Orlando to him. And he explains that that handkerchief story, that a little ago Orlando came across him, that is Oliver, and he was sleeping under a tree with a snake wrapped around his neck. At the sight of that, Orlando fought. The snake went out, and drawing attention to a lion uh, crouching in the bushes, he saved Oliver. When Orlando discovered that the sleeping man was actually his brother Oliver, he initially decided not to support, as he says, but later he showed kindness. That is what where we say reconciliation and forgiveness. The theme of reconciliation and forgiveness is at operation here. Shakespeare's theme is at operation, and Orlando forgives him and decides to reconciliate and fought off that beast, getting wounded in the process. While he fought against the lion, he got wounded. Finally, we see he saved Oliver. Thus, the example of the instance of saving Oliver from the wild things happened at the forest is reported with the handkerchief which is bloody, and he handed over that to Ganymede, that is Rosalind, and she now fainted after hearing that. That means we observe here her faint then prove her pure love towards Orlando. Whatever she criticizes, or whatever she hides, but her real love towards Orlando is evident from this incident. True love between she and Orlando is glorified in this scene. Thus, we find Oliver's words again further made Rosalind to resolute a decision, arrive at a decision to end all pretensions and express her true love to Orlando and end everything. So let's see what happens in the next Act 5, Scene 1 and 2. In the number 1 and 2, we see the meeting between Touchstone and Adri continues, and the scene here sets forum for the completion of the play. Everything is moving towards the denouement or happy ending. We see in scene 1, Touchstone and Adri are together, and they here in particular Adri is anxious to get married uh, Touchstone, and Touchstone promises that they will find someone to perform the wedding ceremony, some priest or someone to take the role of the priest. He, in the meantime, asks her about any other man who claims her. She's asking that there enters William. When William comes there, we see a question of language usage by Touchstone and William is put under discussion, because Touchstone uses a very witty language with this countryman William, and William continues to be very polite in his usage. But we find that it is Touchstone who overpowers in his usage of language. By using his talk, he dominates William. Along with his talk, he also uh, threatens to kill William when he expresses his love to Edry, and by that, Touchstone secures Edry by chasing away William. So William leaves, and meanwhile, Corin enters there, asking both of them, Touchstone and Edry, to come and meet Rosalind, that is Ganymede here. In the next two, scene number two, we again introduced to another love that is already we are introduced to, but Oliver has completely fallen in love with Celia at this time, at his first sight love, right? It is a love at first sight. This is where Shakespeare presents his concept of love at first sight, right? Node in the first sight love. And Orlando is amazed by this, asking his brother, isn't possible that on so little acquaintance you should like her? A question from Orlando, saying that by just having a first sight, how can he love her? That's in order to show us the quality, or that quality of love which can blossom between any. So then Oliver is excited and he says he would marry Celia the next day. Interesting thing is that Oliver, who represented the wickedness so far, has now transformed himself into a man of wisdom, a good personality, because his hatred now has turned into love, an essential transformation which we all want in any life. Similarly, what Shakespeare wants in his play. Again, we find there is Orlando here, who is he's a dumb sufferer there because he is in love with Rosalind, but unable to accept it. Still, he consents Oliver's marriage, but he's heavily hurted because he cannot express it to Rosalind. He misses her very much. And finally, she arrives. Rosalind arrives, appearing as Ganymede, pretending as Ganymede, and Oliver leaves her in order to allow his brother to speak to her. They both remark on how fast they fell in love. That is Celia and Oliver. Then he complains. In spite of his brother's unhappiness, he will be uh, in spite of Orlando's happiness, even if he be, I'm sorry, Orlando says to Rosalind that if Oliver becomes happy after marrying Celia, but in spite of his happiness, Orlando cannot be happy because he is under suffering that he loves Rosalind. So here he paved way for Rosalind to set the final ending to the play, because she takes up when he confesses his lost love with her. She decides to appear with her magical powers to settle everything, and this is one where she assures them all that she would settle everything, appearing with her magical powers. But it is observed here that this magical power in settling everything was something which was very popular in Elizabethan era. So Elizabethan audience wanted it in the place, and Shakespeare knew that pulse of the Elizabethan audience, and he always used some kind of that magic or magical spell. And we see that at the end of the play, there Rosalind decides to do. Anyhow, she assures everyone to settle the issue. Then she promises that if he consents, Rosalind, if Orlando consents, she will arrange. Ganymede will arrange for the marriage of Rosalind with him, and at the same time, Oliver and Celia will also get married along with them. And we have another pair, that Sylvius and Phoebe. They arrive together, and Phoebe is still in love with Ganymede, and Sylvius still loves Phoebe. So Rosalind tells Phoebe to look at Phoebe to turn her side to Sylvius and ask him to inform Rosalind of what it is like to love. So then it is to be all made of signs and tears. That's one of the common lines we see in many of the plays. That is, love is made of sighs and tears. That means suffering and happiness and all the part of that, and all of the Various lovers here finally agree to marry one another, and Rosalind finally uh, gets fed up with this, decided to settle everything the very next day. When we come to the scene number three, there Touchstone and Adria are commenting on how wonderful the next day will be when they get married. Here you find that their union is in contrasting, is a kind of contrasting union of contrasting persona, because even we saw in the last case, probably in the last act also, Adri's language simplicity contrasts with Touchstone wit. Here also you see that Adri's mindset is in contrast to Touchstone. At the same time, Touchstone's idea of marriage, his concept against imagination, his idea of imagination, everything is in contrast with others' romantic love here. Then two of Duke's seniors, Page, arrive and Touchstone asks them to sing a song for him. They do, but he considers that song as a foolish song, and because that was of romantic thing, right? Then the last act, last scene, scene four. There, Duke Senior has gathered everyone, all his men. At that time, Ganymede appears, and she as yeah, they were expecting whether Ganymede can settle everything or not. Ganymede arrives, and with Phoebe, Sylvius, and others, and she asks Duke if he will marry his daughter Rosalind to Orlando. If she make, if he, that is here, Ganymede makes magic to make Rosalind appear, and the Duke certainly agrees with that. There, the settling of the marriage is decided. Ganymede then will accept Sylvius as no, she appears in a real manner, right? That is, she then the changed her situation. She changed her disguise. She attired as Rosalind. She appears before everyone, and when the Rosalind appeared there. Meanwhile, we observe all the pairs are ready to get married, and the couples end all kind of conflict. Somewhere we are introduced to Duke Ferdinand also, that is Jacques de Boys, who appear there suddenly, the middle brother of Orlando and Oliver. He says Duke Frederick has gathered an army and planned to attack them all. Meanwhile, Duke Frederick himself appears there, resigned his crown, and returned it to Duke Senior. This can settle everything. Finally, we have noticed Jacques, the critic of the country, chooses to stay in the forest. Though all the other people here, all the other pairs or people here are happy with the happy ending of the play, the melancholy character Jacques decides to leave the woods and spend time with newly converted Duke somewhere. Right? That is the thing. Then finally, we notice all the characters leave to the court, leaving Duke Senior, sorry, Duke Frederick leaving the dukedom to uh, dukedom to uh, Duke Senior. At the end, we see because of the newly wed relationship, Orlando becomes the heir to the entire dukedom as a result of his marriage to Rosalind. Thus, the play ends, and then comes the epilogue, which tells the audience that Rosalind is the one who performs epilogue. She hopes that they enjoyed the play, and then makes a point reference to the fact that if she were a woman, she would kiss the men present. This reference to the fact that a male is playing her role is unusual. So Rosalind ends the play with a courtesy and with a kind of bidding farewell to all. Thus, the play ended happily with the settlement of all the conflicts and the complications created in the plot. Thank you for watching.